Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Check Me Out. And this one is a little bit of a fave for me because I am a mad baker in my personal life. And I have used these mixes before. And as we were just saying before we jumped onto the interview, I have tried your baking mixes, Secret Kiwi Kitchen. And this is an exciting time for you guys because you've just been launched into big retail. And so I really think this is a perfect time to be talking to you both. So welcome, guys.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hi,
Yeah.
Laura. Nice to see you.
Hi. Yeah, look, awesome. So tell us a little bit about Secret Kiwi Kitchen.
So, Lulu and I decided during the second lockdown, was it, to launch our own baking mix business. What we wanted to do differently was, as Lauren we were just chatting earlier, and we were talking about the big American conglomerate brands, like the Betty Crockers and the Duncan Hines, all those kind of ones that are on the shelf in the supermarkets. But we didn't want to go down that path. We wanted to do something real, that we would make for our families. So we wanted to bring home baking into the supermarkets and make it accessible for all those families that are super busy or might not enjoy cooking but enjoy eating the baking and just making enjoying real home cooked food.
Yeah, and the point of difference being really champion like New Zealand ingredients, like the beautiful milk that we have here. Because I thought it was crazy that we were importing all these like American brands that have like hormone-filled milk and GMO flour, and it just feels like such a privilege that we have such great ingredients here to be able to like create a product that highlights them. But it was actually a really funny story. So Claire, she kind of found me the way we came into this business pre-COVID. We had very different lives, and I was doing marketing for different companies. A lot of them were in the hospitality sector. And then when COVID hit, I pretty much lost my job. So Claire came over one day to pick up her daughter from a play date. And she saw me probably like, I was like, at that time, I had fantasies of being like a pasta artist, and I was just making pasta every day. And she said, "Do you want to start a food-based business?" And we're both obviously passionate about food. Claire's like the neighborhood baker who bakes, for everybody. And I love, cooking everything from scratch at home and also not from scratch. And so she said, "Do you want to start a business?" And so, with nothing to do, being recently unemployed, we launched into Secret Kiwi Kitchen. And then when Auckland's second lockdown happened, we realized it was like this, it was a little bit early in the game for us to launch, but we realized we had actually a captive audience of people at home who needed, like, people were having problems getting flour. So we just dove in and we launched ahead of schedule our business, really going out to our local community and advertising like through the Facebook group. And it just went like gangbusters from that unusual starting point.
Awesome. And what were the difficulties with starting that food business? Obviously, being stuck at home would be one of them. But as you say, and I experienced this myself, is that everyone all of a sudden became artisan bakers over lockdown,
Yeah.
and flour was thin on the ground. And so, what was it like to be able to access the ingredients to make those mixes? And what other challenges did you find being in a pandemic?
Well, it's kind of fun. Well, one of the things that's kind of funny, because I know you're a packaging specialist and you create such beautiful packaging, is that we started, one of the big issues is that the printer was closed. So we couldn't even actually have proper packaging. So we started our mixes in coffee bags, and we actually on a home print, it's like
Home printer.
Yep, this is like Kiwi Ingenuity #8, home printer, taping on the labels, the kids cutting them out. Like it was really
Literally.
just.
We had like a guillotine, and we printed off these like makeshift labels. Literally ordered black coffee bags, as plain and simple as you can get, and as cheap as you could get, because we were like on a, we were bootstrapping it big time.
Yes.
So we had these coffee bags and the home printer, and with the guillotine and literally Pritt sticks, like glue sticks, gluing them on. Like, oh God, that looks really wonky. Can we like peel it off and re-stick it? And it was pretty funny. But and then we were like sealing them with like hair straighteners, and like it was as basic as it could be. But bit by bit we got it done. And it's like even more sweet, because I think back to those days, and at the time it was exhausting, wasn't it? And it was so tough to kind of get it all out and get it done, but it really was the making of us. And we look back on the packaging, we were so proud of that packaging at the time, and now we look back, our new packaging has just arrived and we're like, oh my god, we love it, it looks so amazing. And then we see, like, you know, on the Facebook memories that pop up a year ago today, 2 years ago today, and we see our coffee bags and we're like, oh my god.
I think, though, what the really cool thing about that is that you, even though you were doing these things, and like everybody starts that way in a certain way, is that you also obviously had a product that that people loved. So what was on the outside of the bag, you know, was only a small representation of what was inside. And so I think that that's really a good validation for your product, in that, you know, it was a really good product. So it didn't really matter if you were sealing it with a hair straightener or whatever it was that you had to do to get by. So the product was validated, and also you were serving a massive, massive need for consumers at that time. So, you know, you could have hand delivered the ingredients in a bowl, and probably people still would have, you know, enjoyed it. So that's really kudos to the fact that you obviously had a really good product from the start.
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the things that I think made the product really good is that Claire and I have 7 kids between the two of us. And the first baking mix we came up was with the brownie. And her family loves like really gooey brownies. My family, like, we like that too, but we're like, my kids are really insistent on having crispy edges. So in order to get a brownie that could be both gooey and then really crispy edges, it took quite some doing. And we agreed that we wouldn't put out a product unless all our kids agreed that it was great. And that's even though kids love sweets, that was harder than anticipated, pleasing everybody's palates.
And you also have to remember as well that this is still like isolation. And so to try and get things, you know, even to each other was an extra layer of difficulty. And, you know, it was all, there was all these rules around and, you know, in place, and we had to kind of leave things on doorsteps and then back away, and, you know, just taste this and tell me, and then get back to me and we'll see. And so it was a lot of driving back and forth to houses and putting things on doorsteps and leaving again. And so it was a long lockdown did kind of put an extra layer of difficulty, but also I think it was, like you say, a really creative time for a lot of people. And you know, produced
it was the right time. And I think too that even though it was a difficult time, I think there was an extra layer of kindness. So I think our customers really, really went out of their ways to like champion us and support us.
Well, again, I think because everybody was at home and everybody knew, you know, everybody knows what's happening, like you say, with the kindness. But I think everybody really dug deep then as well. And like you say, with that, people liked what was inside the bags, but we had to get that message out to them as well, because, you know, we couldn't get everybody to come and taste it, because the idea was at the start that we would have a kind of tasting session at Lauren's, because she had a nice big house, and so we thought we'd get people to come and taste. But then, of course, we couldn't do that. So we really had to rely on word of mouth, and it did spread that way. It was definitely a village effort, and then it spread further afield.
Yeah, it was interesting too, because our original business plan was to hit farmers markets up, but because of COVID restrictions, there were no farmers markets happening. So actually, that obstacle actually ended up being a positive to us, because we reached out to stores way ahead of when we would even have been brave enough to think about doing that, because we had no other option. And luckily stores too, at this time, they were champion local brands. We started getting yeses, which was very exciting.
And that's so good. And you're right. And the traditional way for people to really start with a food business is to look at farmers markets and all that. So it's almost like the universe was smiling on you. You know, it's like we're totally just going to skip that step, and you're just going to go straight into, you know, into speaking to stores. So what's your obviously you've spoken a little bit about your strategy for getting out to the market during the pandemic, and what's changed for you now that we're somewhat pandemic free?
In terms of marketing, how do we market?
Yeah. So what's the difference these days between what you had to do? Obviously, because now you're out and you can speak to people and you can get people to taste things and all that kind of thing. So what's changed for you since the pandemic's somewhat finished?
Well, I think when we did finally, we took advice from there's a lady that lives locally, and she turned out to be the first owner of Mrs. Higgins. So she was at first a lovely mentor for us, wasn't she? And she gave us a lot of advice. I think that was critical as well, because I think if she hadn't loved our baking, she came round to my house and we baked for her, and she loved it. And I think if she hadn't loved it, she wouldn't have been, so good backing us. But she gave us loads of advice, and her top piece of advice was get out to the farmers markets when you can. So, and basically because people need to taste it. And I can testify to that, because as soon as the samples are gone, people at farmers markets, people tend not to come over. And if they don't come over, obviously, and they're not tasting, they're not buying, and they're not experiencing it. So people here, I'm sure it's the same everywhere, people love to taste samples, and so that was such a great way of getting the word out to people. And even your more kind of staunch older Kiwi bakers, the older generation that would, I mean, like my grandmother probably would have just been like, a baking mix, I wouldn't buy a baking, I'm a good baker, and things like that. Had a lot of that. Well, we had a lot of that on the markets, and 99% of the time we'd let them say all that, and we'd be like, completely understand. And I'm sure you are an amazing baker. I'm sure they were amazing bakers, like most Kiwi women are. And I said, but just try, just have a little taste and tell me what you think. And sure enough, once they tasted it, they were like, well, it's very nice, very nice. And how much did you say a bag was?
I think that our biggest marketing strategy from the beginning, and it continues to be, it has been word of mouth. And I think we still have a fairly limited marketing budget, and because most of our profits have gone into new product development and expansion into stores. And so we do not spend a lot on marketing. I think the thing that helps us the most is actually user-generated content. So when people are sharing, which like the posts that do the best are the ones when we have clients who are posting, when they take our cake mix and they make their kids, 5th birthday cake and cover it in like M&Ms. And I think our clients end up being our best vehicle for marketing.
Yeah, and that all ties into experience, and like you say, test driving, trialing, and experience, and having your target market test and show that the product is good is creates that trust. And I've spoken about it with a number of clients and other people on this podcast. And that trust is the biggest thing that you can use to sell your brand. And also, obviously, then the emotional pull, which gains trust. And I think the fact that, like you say, with a lot of Kiwi women, it's a thing. We're like, oh, I'm a good baker. I don't need a baking mix. But even for me, I quite like using a baking mix, because sometimes, like for me, I said I've got a 4-year-old. I just don't have the time to make things from scratch. And the versatility of actually going, like you say, you can use the cake mix to make a 5th birthday cake, and it sort of can either save a lot of time or it can save some time in just doing that first section and stuff like that. So the convenience of it is also really a massive factor.
It's funny, this question of using the word scratch, because I'm American, and in America, everybody has like cake mixes and baking mixes in their cabinet. And when you make a cake from scratch, and you say, and if you bring it to party, I made it from scratch, it definitely can include the fact that you've used a mix as the base. So the idea is that it's like either the icing or the way you decorate, it's like the personal flourishes that you add to it, it makes it your creation. So it is kind of funny where the Kiwis do have that pride of like, really scratch means every single ingredient. But what we've done is we've actually just taken away the boring prep work. And it is actually, because food scientists didn't come up with these recipes, two mums did, that it's just like we've taken that prep work out of it. But it is funny in terms of like, even marketing how that works. Like,
Yeah.
there was a big movement in the US for a while where they call like hashtags, like it's like semi-homemade. And so there's like a lot of pride in where you start with something kind of prepped for you, but then you take it the rest of the way.
Yeah,
I think in New Zealand there's it's that whole tall poppy syndrome thing is that, and it's just something, it's just a thing that kind of hangs around a lot of us, and in New Zealand it doesn't exist in America, I believe, and so it is something that a lot of brands outside of baking and things that we do. Kiwis are very receptive to new things and trying new things, and from a food perspective, but also there's a lot of tradition, and we're a very young country, so we've kind of done things a certain way for a very long time. So to disrupt that consumer behavior is tricky, but you guys have done it, so it's awesome.
I think it's a relearning process. Yeah, definitely changing the thinking. But you say, Kiwi in America. I grew up in Britain. My mum was a single parent, and the only time she was a teacher and very busy. The only time that she ever baked, I must preface this by saying she doesn't enjoy baking, and she still really doesn't. But the only time she baked, it would be like a hedgehog cake for your birthday or something like that. And even my gran, actually, she was not really a baker, which is unusual for like a wartime kind of granny. So I was the first baker in my family. And even when Lauren and I started this business, I had never bought a baking mix ever. And that was kind of another thing that we had to, because when we started, I think we actually started with dessert sauces. That was kind of the first kind of step into it, wasn't it? And then we were like, well, we need something to put the sauces on. How about we make brownies? And that kind of developed from there. But I had never never bought a baking mix. And Lauren said, if we're going to do this, you need to try baking mixes. So I bought, some, and I must say I was kind of snobby about it at first. Now we were like, if we're going to do this, it has to taste amazing. It can't taste like the baking mixes that people think about here now. It has to taste amazing. I think that's what that was always our goal, and that's what we've done, and that's the pride in it that we have, is that it tastes so fresh and amazing. And it's something that even somebody like me and my family who had never bought a baking mix before, and busy people that can bake, but also now I think there's just so many pressures on, well, we say women because it's still kind of that way, but often there's more men at home now as well, and more men baking. But yeah, historically it's been women that have to spin all the plates and still produce an amazing dessert or something like that. So I think it's more acceptable now to buy the baking mixes and save yourself time.
Actually, my ideal client is not a stay-at-home mom. It's the kids when they need baking for their sports team or shared lunch to empower them to cook.
Shared Kai tomorrow at 10 p.m. at night. Yeah.
Love that. And now you mentioned, Lulu, that the actual mixes yourselves that you came up with were not designed by a food tech. And when bringing things into retail, obviously, that's scaling up quite a lot. How did you go from doing just the process of doing it as it eats? It's not really e-commerce because you guys did it through the pandemic and stuff like that, but how did you take your recipes and scale them up to be suitable to go into big retail?
Well, one thing that's important to note is that while we created the original recipes ourselves, we then went to food tech afterwards to consult with them, and then to make sure that it being shelf stable and all those questions that people have, and how would what to expect for best before dates, and to make sure we crossed all dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's. But I think it makes a difference, instead of having an idea from a product and going to the food technologist first, to actually start with with the recipe, and us being our ideal target market in a way. So we're creating the product someone like us would use, and then getting the food techs and the professionals to weigh in.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yes, I having that, like you say, dotting your T's and your I's. I always get that mixed up and I try to say dotting your T's and you're crossing your I's.
I think I got it right for once. I always
You got it.
Tomato.
You did it right. Is
close.
that it is a necessary thing to do. And for a lot of people, I think when they start with a food product, they go at a farmer's market and they go, cool, now I'm going to go stick it into retail. But the step from, and we can talk about your journey with that, the step to even just with the actual product itself, going from that to retail is really big because you have to do shelf life testing and shelf stability and all that kind of stuff. So when you got exactly, so when you got to that point and you got your first, yes, cool, we want to have you in our New World stores and all that, what were your first kind of thoughts, and how did you take it from that to the large retail stores?
Well, there was a step before in terms of like trying to figure out that. So it's a step before even going to the large stores is trying to make sure your product and your packaging and your volume amounts are correct. So for instance, like in a package, is it going to be 400 grams, 500 grams? Because when we first started baking a cake, we would just, we like to make massive cakes. We have big families. And then, so you have to start scaling, start seeing what other people in the market are doing, what's a common expectation for grammage and weight for a product like yours. And then you have to reverse engineer your actual recipe to make sense for, long life and for that kind of environment. So there were like changes we had to make, or like so we got the product right first. And I think the biggest challenge for us in terms of getting into big retailers is that our business is fully self-funded. We have no investors. And so all our growth points we've had to self-fund with our profit. And we've done that not by, I think a lot of businesses here in New Zealand, they'll take people who start businesses take loans against their own homes, and that's something we didn't do. We started with $1,000, and then any time we made profit, we put that back into the product. So the pain points with going into the biggest pain points in the company have been when we've launched into a new big retailer.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, with going and approaching a big retailer, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you going in and, showing them your product and what the response was?
It was terrifying. I remember our first ever foray into pitching. I think it was Devonport New World. And we went with our laptop and we had a whole presentation, didn't we? And we met with the owner and the grocery buyer, and we were sweating. We were pretty nervous, and but they were great. They supported local, and the whole hashtag support local, that was very much felt there. And again, with the village, we were already quite popular in the village. And so that was our first store. That was the first one we got where we lived.
And that would be a tip to somebody else trying to get in, because we didn't even realize how the whole system works in New Zealand, that basically you have to be accepted into some of these big chains, but then a lot of them have like 5% where they have discretionary ability to choose maybe a local or product that they particularly like. So when you're launching, before you're ranged, you're vying to try and get store buyers or owners to believe in your product and to allocate their like 5% towards you and to take that risk. So we're very lucky that in our neighborhood, our local New World is a very successful one, and they championed us first, and then next came the New World in Takapuna. So we were able slowly to branch out from where we live demographically to new worlds with different buyers that would take a chance on us.
And I think it definitely comes down as well to support, and we were really lucky because like with the owner of Devonport New World, he was great, and then the owner of Takapuna New World, it was just such a lovely guy who genuinely wants to give people a leg up, and help them and support them. And he just sat us down with me and he said, how can I help you? And he genuinely meant it. And
at that point, we didn't even know how to price. He's like, before you go
he gave us
to
so
New
much
World,
advice.
this is like how you even have a pricing sheet and how you build in sales tiers. Like we were like clueless. This was a whole new industry from us. I feel like we just had our 3-year anniversary this last week. So this is a good time to talk to you. But it's like we just got, and we're still learning.
We're still learning. I don't
know if we got a degree, but it's like we're enrolled in an MBA program.
Yeah. We learn new things all the time still. I mean, we've come a long way. It was a swift upwards trajectory, and we have been definitely helped by a lot of supportive people through the way. And even the head buyers, you know, of the supermarkets, when you start to build relationships within the business, and they can see that you're a genuine, authentic person or people, and that you're just trying to, you know, you want to help them help you, because that all, you know,
it was very interesting. I was just listening to your podcast you did with the caker, and hearing about her experience going from New Zealand to the US. And we've had some approaches, people interested in Australia and Singapore, but we've been really cautious about expansion overseas, because there's such, here in New Zealand, it's so easy to talk to people and it's so tight knit. And I think people are willing to champion local, that it's really an extra step that we're cautious about overextending ourselves when what was the expression she used, that it's really hard to, you know, to get above the noise in the US. And so we're relishing this moment very much, being in New Zealand and getting the support we are here, as you know, as we're putting our ducks in a row and thinking about the future and where it might lead us.
We're in a safe little cocoon here, and we've very much enjoyed that.
Oh, that's so good to know. And the more and more of these stories that I actually get to talk with everyone about, is there is this real thing about, because I think the media paints a picture about the duopoly that we have, the supermarkets, and there is definitely an element of them saying, you know, jump and you say how high, but also there's a lot of help out there, like from the local stores and the buyers and the people there. If you approach them, even if you're not ready to actually get your product in, you can actually talk to these guys and say, look, this is what I'm planning, and get their advice on things. Build those relationships. Relationships are so key and important when you're looking at retail in New Zealand. And the really good thing about the fact that we do have a duopoly is there's really only 2 camps that you have to talk to. Whereas if, you know, you're looking at the US, you've got Trader Joe's, you've got all, like, so many different options, and the same thing with Australia. So I think there are lots of good things, but to the fact that we are a small country. So it's really awesome that you guys, you know, had that social proof. And so when you were able to go and speak to New World Devonport, he was like, oh yeah, great, you know, maybe he'd heard about you guys before and stuff like that. And so having that social proof, and then being able to go and speak to the next store, and the next store is creates that trust factor. And I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, it certainly has been very, very supportive network here. And it's spread out incrementally, like you say. Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, you also have to say we've gotten so much support, but it's not like it's been totally easy breezy. We've had a lot of obstacles and a lot of people that say no, and you have to, like, you got to take the rejection along with it. So along with all our yeses, we've gotten our fair share of nays too.
Yeah, for sure. And that's all part of being in business, right? It's a tied in and tied out sort of mentality. Some days the tide's in and you're doing really well, and sometimes the tide's out and you've got to go and find somewhere else to swim. And so I think it's such a great story. So what's next for you guys? You did speak a little bit about, you know, being overseas and everything like that, but what's the next year look like for you?
Well, we're excited. We have a couple of new products coming out. So we're going to ride that. One that just hit recently, we have a universal cake mix, and it immediately sold out. And we're getting great feedback on that. And then we have another mystery product coming out soon. And then
tease, Lauren.
A secret product, a secret Kiwi Kitchen product.
I'm glad you said that, because I would have totally dropped that.
and we have it is an interesting time, because a while ago we had somebody in the US who was interested in importing us, and we were watching the dollar. The exchange rate is so in favor of doing something like that, because we're waiting for the pivotal moment. But we are cautious right now. We are taking our profits and putting into new product development and really securing our foundation here in New Zealand. So that will continue, but we are formulating plans of what going overseas would look like. And then we've also had some interest in, working directly with some wholesale avenues.
Awesome. Oh, that's wonderful. So if you could give any advice to anyone that's starting out, what would it be?
Just do it. Like, I actually think, if I knew what I know now, I'm not sure I would do like.
I don't know.
In one way I would do it because I'm really proud of what we've built, but oh man, it was a lot of work.
I think just do it. Don't think too much about it.
Yeah.
Jump in, give it a go, see if it works for you.
And talk to everybody, because I was so amazed that there wasn't like a book, and maybe this is a job for you, Laura, is like, I was like, why isn't there a book that explains a manual, like how, if you're going to New World, how you price yourself,
for dummies.
You're going, like, and I was like, where's the manual? And I was like, so we're going to be a new vendor. Where's like, where are all the tips and tricks?
Yeah.
And it didn't exist. So the tips and tricks are just talking to everybody you can and jotting those notes and saving them.
Yeah. Awesome. And that's precisely why I'm doing this, is so that because there is a really dark spot between the farmers market to foodstuffs, is what I call it. And people go, cool, all right.
Yeah.
Where is it all? And so that's partly why I have decided to do this, is to capture a little bit of the stories and tips and tricks and demystify things. So
there's so many things, Laura, like in terms of like food licensing, and then making sure your labels are compliant and approved by sure quality. Like, there's so many steps to make sure, if you have a warehouse, and even like we were looking at Australia for warehousing, and I was talking to people, I'm like, well, is it legit? Is it legit? Is it signed off for food? Did the supermarkets recognize it?
Shelf.
And even like, so every market you go into, you're asking these questions again. I wish there's a book for each one, like how to, and when you secure a warehouse, here are the check boxes. If you get a distributor, here are the things you need to know. Like, because there's a lot of hurdles,
and so you have to ask yourself if you're prepared for all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of nitty gritty, but there's a lot of joy in it as well, and there's so much pride. So highs and lows.
And the best part, I have to say, is meeting food, because we both love food, and I love food people, and I love talking about food with other people. And it is just,
I just love eating food. I don't need to talk.
I like all of the above.
I don't need to talk so much.
But it is good to meet so many people who are in the food world. Just this morning, I came from a meeting with somebody who makes like chocolate fillings, and he had used our mix to make a cupcake, and it's really neat, those collabs.
Awesome. Oh, look, thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Well done on your journey so far. And I really can't wait to see where you guys go to next. I think it's so advantageous to see, not just Kiwi women, but Kiwi mums and people, going and pivoting through the pandemic and making something that is such a dark time in our lives a really awesome thing going forward. And so thank you so much. And honestly, best of luck with where Secret Kiwi Kitchen goes next.
No, thank you so much, Laura.